Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the CoinGeek Weekly Livestream, and I am your host, Mr. Kurt Wuckert Jr. We are live from sunny South Florida, both broadcast and produced by our super secret Mr. Producer, doing his jam. And we are getting cooked here under the hot sun. I want to say hey to Joey, who got the first comment here up in Northwest Florida. He's our panhandler. Probably not the way he'd like to be introduced, but he's hanging out and loyal listener to the show. Thank you, Joey. Let us know who else is out there, everybody. And please like and share while we're here. We've got our guest today is Steven Nekhaila. He is the chairman of the Libertarian National Committee, and we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff. We're going to talk Bitcoin, altcoins, a little bit of politics per usual, and perhaps take your questions if any of you rascals have anything pleasant to say. And I'm looking forward to doing all that. I want to thank our sponsors. We have Rock Wallet, who is the perennial sponsor of the show, a pure self-custody wallet allowing you to hold your BTC, BCH, BSV, and Ethereum and Litecoin and a bunch of stable coins and some other stuff too. Thank you, Rock Wallet, for your support and your patronage. And also, if anybody wants to exchange their coins, they can do that on the built-in exchange, which is itself not custodial, but it is pretty convenient. So if you want to make your swaps, you can make your swaps in Rock Wallet. I also want to give a shout out to our dear friends and sponsors over at Otherworldly TCG. The Otherworldly folks have been so kind to give out a full deck of cards for about a year now to the comment of the day. So if you have the funniest or the most insightful or perhaps the most devastating comment of the day, you can receive a free deck of cards from Otherworldly TCG directly to your Handcash wallet. The game is a blockchain-powered application, but they also have physical cards. If you like to sit with your friends and pass the cards around, if you want to go buy them at GameStop, you can do that. And the affiliate rewards that you create as you use the game, if you're using the game on-chain, the affiliate rewards go upstream to the store. So they have an incentive to sell your stuff too. Yes, that's true. You can use the blockchain in the real world to do real business. Wouldn't you know it, everybody? So thank you, Otherworldly TCG, for your sponsorship. We really appreciate you. And of course, you, the viewers. So if you do not know who Steven Nekhaila is, you have about 30 seconds to start Googling it and ask relevant questions. And it'll be a good time. So let's run the ad. I don't want to sit and talk about myself. I posted a banger article today, actually. If you want to check my pinned tweet after the show, I wrote about how basically the problem of big tech, big banks, and big government actually started hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And I would take you on not a meander. It's a long article, but I promise it's healthy and fun and dense and necessary. And so if you want to see how you get from Meyer Nathan Rothschild all the way to Peter Thiel, we'll get you there. But go ahead and check my pinned post on X to read about it. It's going to be a good time, everybody. So let's run the ad, and we'll come back with Steven Nekhaila. Hey, Steven, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kurt. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start real quick with your story. It's funny. I followed you just a little bit because I was curious about like the chairman stuff. I know there was a little bit of a shakeup after the sort of Gary Johnson debacle, and then the Libertarian Party endorsed Donald Trump, and then kind of ran Oliver and some other stuff. And, you came into a weird swarm, and it was a little bit, I think, of a surprise. Like, you know what, we're putting Steven in charge of the committee. So I would love to hear a little bit about your story, like getting into libertarian politics in general and how you've ended up as the chair.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll try not to give my start back when I was born speech, but I'll go back to when I first read The Creature of Jekyll Island, and I think that's what got me set on the path of libertarianism, and also very curious about central banking, which of course was a huge Pandora's box to much more, many other liberty issues, because once you understand the Federal Reserve and the fact that the Fed essentially feeds the entire government through inflation, the war machine, the welfare machine, et cetera, you start to go from there. So I was pretty young when I discovered J. Edward Griffin, discovered individualism as a political philosophy, individualism versus collectivism. And when I got to college, I went to Paul Fest in Tampa because I was a big Ron Paul supporter, like I'm sure many of us are, and met Gary Johnson, who was running for the 2012 presidential ticket under the Libertarian Party. So I was shocked to see the platform. Hey, legalize weed, no more wars, this and that. Cool, sign me up, And I became one of the founding members of the Libertarian Party of the Florida Keys affiliate. Went on to join the Libertarian Party of Florida as a region rep, then at large. I was chair for several years, and I've been on the Libertarian National Committee from 2016 till present. I became chair of the Libertarian National Committee back in February after my predecessor resigned. But prior to that, was a big crypto guy back in the 2014, 2015, started getting into crypto. Helped run a cryptocurrency called Ultracoin, ultracoin.io. The website still exists, but I'm not sure what remnants of Ultracoin still exist. But back then, it was a top 30 cryptocurrency. I've mined. I've been to the International Bitcoin Conference in Miami, Miners United in Vegas back then. And back then, the scene was very, very different. I mean, as you know, Kurt, it was a wild, wild west of crypto. I read the white paper. I think Bitcoin was at $2.50 when I first discovered it in 2012, and then it went up to like $300, and I was like, the boat sale. But then it went to $1,000. I'm like, it's definitely gone. Then it crashed down to like 400. I was like, all right, I got to get it. I got to start mining, whatever. But for me, it was more the utility of cryptocurrency and the ideology behind it that actually made it so attractive, and which is what got me into it. Because I'm sure, like many people have been around the block for a while, they probably thought, or they had friends and family that were telling them crypto is a scam. And then I think once Bitcoin started getting to big numbers, almost everybody's contacting you. How do I get into this? How do I, mine or buy it, or what do I use it for, or whatever. So yeah, it's been a really exciting journey for me, both in the liberty movement. Dabbled in the crypto world for a while there, and hoping to do some great things with the Libertarian Party moving forward, especially as we get into some very interesting times here politically. And I'm sure we can talk a lot about that.
For sure. Yeah, I'd like to talk the politics first, and then a little bit how, like, Bitcoin and politics have kind of become the same thing, especially over the last year or so. But when you get libertarians, my audience is probably half libertarians and then half other, or people who don't care, or non-Americans and whatever. You get a lot of people who are like, I don't know, aren't libertarians just like Republicans who are gay or like to smoke weed or something? And like, so you get like this sort of like very reductive, like, I don't know, they just kind of sound like Republicans on a lot of issues. But then actually I get Republican, like you get the opposite, Democrats who say, the libertarians are just trying to suck votes away from the Democrats on some of the social issues and some of these other things. So I think both sides see the libertarians as like a weird splinter group designed to disrupt their like right to power. So can you just walk through in a very basic sense, like what is the Libertarian Party's goal and purpose? And are you guys just here to troll, or are you here to actually get elected? And is there a plan to lead if you were to be elected, or if various members were to be elected to lead in various positions?
Absolutely, yeah. The Libertarian Party has existed since 1972. It's been around for over 50 years at this point. It started out as a sort of subversive political party as a vehicle to push the libertarian ideology, which I think over the last 50 years has really exploded. I mean, if we just think about the amount of people that are starting to use or identify with the word libertarian. So what does it actually mean to be a libertarian? I think in a nutshell, to be a libertarian means don't hit people and don't take their stuff. We believe that the government's only purpose should be to defend life, liberty, and property. And beyond that, it should be left up to the free market. We don't believe in the transfer of wealth from one group to another. We believe in maximum personal freedom. And we believe that every human being has their own set of values that the government or the state should not try to change or homogenize people, or to get them to live a certain way or act a certain way, nor should you be taxed in order to fund somebody else or some other program or thing that you don't agree on. We don't necessarily love the idea of democracy. We believe democracy is mob rule. We believe in the rule of law to be based on these principles of the non-aggression principle, not aggressing on others to get what you want. And primarily we believe that in a truly just society, most services are provided by the free market voluntarily. So that's sort of libertarianism in a nutshell. The founding fathers were considered some of the early libertarian thinkers in Europe throughout the 1700s and 1800s through now. Thinkers like Mises, Murray Rothbard, Hayek, Frederick Bastiat, and many others paint the landscape. But at our core, we are small government, pro-free market, pro-civil liberties, libertarians. And the Republicans and Democrats often, there may be some overlap, at least rhetorically, maybe in practice.
Yeah.
So they do get rather upset when we compete because they think that we owe them our vote. But at the end of the day, I believe that a wasted vote is voting for somebody who doesn't represent you. So the Libertarian Party exists to push libertarian philosophy and also get libertarians elected, which we focus locally. Of course, we run our presidential candidate, and we do run state, house, and federal elections as well. But most of our success is local. And the mayor of Wichita, Kansas, for instance, is a card-carrying libertarian. Many county races, mayoral races, partisan and nonpartisan. And I think we're just getting started even after 50 years. But the fact that libertarianism is becoming so prevalent as a label, but also from attacks from people like Stephen Miller, those pesky libertarians are at it again. I think it does show that the philosophy and the party are growing in a mainstream sense.
Sure. No, I love that. And for the record, I consider myself philosophically a libertarian. I haven't voted since 2012. I was a Ron Paul volunteer, and the way that the whole thing went down at the convention, I just was like, this is a scam, and I have to focus on something else. But like, I still focus on the issues and these kind of things. But until something big changes for me, I'm a non-voting but very much supportive, libertarian. And part of the reason for this is sort of the co-opting, right? Like, you got Trump, who is very much not a libertarian by my estimation that I can see at all,
to say the least.
Was somehow able to bear that banner such that the party even endorsed him. And really, I'm not exactly sure why. Like, I really think it comes down to like maybe just one core issue. I really think it came down to kind of the Bitcoin politics and then relating to Ross Ulbricht. And I think a lot of people in the libertarian movement just kind of said, you know what, those are two things I really, really care about. And I'm going to bite my tongue and cast the vote or whatever. But I'd love to hear how that played out in the background, because I know you did not support that idea. So I'd love to hear your take on it.
No, absolutely. I just had to, how about that? So the party never officially or unofficially endorsed Donald Trump. I know my predecessor was certainly, I would say, had an affinity to the Trump camp for many reasons. I know Trump came to our convention promising to free Ross Ulbricht, which he absolutely came through with his promise. That, of course, has been a big effort in the liberty movement dating back more than a decade, thanks to his mom, people like Martha Bueno, and many, many, many others that have all had a hand in this. And, ultimately, I mean, Trump is, and I try to be very, very fair when I talk about Trump. He's a mixed bag. There's some things that Trump does that I can say that's a good thing. I wish it would go further. But there's also a lot of things, especially lately, that I can say, we don't like this, and this. We'd like to see this instead. So I think as far as cryptocurrency goes, I have been surprised in the Trump administration for, to quite honestly, giving more liberty to crypto. And I think, back in the mid thousands to our 2010s, we saw a lot of back and forth on regulations for crypto. I mean, people in Florida were going to jail for trading Bitcoin for cash. I mean, there was at least a couple of people I've heard of stories, people meeting up. I think it was Local Bitcoin, or I forget the website.
That was a couple of those guys, a couple of the bigger brokers on there got hit hard.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so it was like a very legal black area, and then it became sort of this gray market kind of thing. And now, I mean, crypto is legitimized, I'd say. But of course, back in the day, I mean, I could tell you, I've had Bitcoin sitting on an exchange for 5 days. I just bought it, and then all of a sudden the exchange goes down, it gets hacked, the money's gone. It's like, all right, I need to have a physical wallet immediately. You start to learn all this security stuff just by necessity. And now, I mean, of course you had your Mt. Gox, you've had what was it with the big
FTX and
FTX.
Yep.
Yeah. But, it's not perfect. That's why I think being your own bank is the most important thing. And that's really the whole point of crypto anyway, is to have total control of your own assets. Of course, we had El Salvador make a Bitcoin their reserve currency, and then Bitcoin just hit an all-time high of $120,000. So I think it shows, I think Bitcoin, Peter Schiff may disagree, but as global uncertainty continues to rise, I think you're going to see the price of Bitcoin continue to rise, especially with some things like the Big Beautiful Bill. I think there's some interaction between Bitcoin and the bond market because once you start to see more risk in dollar-denominated assets, you're also going to see, I think, Bitcoin and gold and silver and a lot of these other alternative currencies be seen as a global safe haven. And even when you see things like sanctions, cryptocurrency is a great way to go around sanctions or totalitarian governments, especially with privacy coins. So I think there's a big use case for crypto. We're just starting to scratch the surface, especially as the world gets more and more uncertain. I think we're going to start to see the utility in ways that we'd probably prefer not to, but I think the mechanism's there.
It's funny. I don't know if OG is exactly the right word, but I got into Bitcoin in 2012. So I'd like to say I'm like maybe sophomore Bitcoiner or something like that. But, the culture really has changed quite a bit. And, I see Bitcoin BTC as sort of like, it's like a TradFi asset. Like it moves, like you could essentially chart the Facebook stock and use that to trade BTC, and it's probably going to trade about, you'll be pretty close. And the reason is because of how closely it's correlated to just an at risk or risk on tech asset. So it's the same kind of people who are investing in FANG stocks are looking at BTC as like, I don't know, this one's interesting too. And the fact that it's held in custodians and, companies like BlackRock and MicroStrategy or Strategy B, they're called now, are holding most of these assets. Like you're starting to get this extreme TradFi-ification of BTC, which was this legitimate rebel asset. And, hey, like this allows us to have frictionless commerce between each other, like had a deep kind of agorist bent to it. And I think that's largely gone. I don't know if it's completely gone, but it has shifted quite a bit, and I'm curious, like what is your take on that kind of thing with strategic national reserve and guys like Larry Fink are now Bitcoiners, and it's a very weird world to live in, given that 5 years ago these people were very clearly like, hey, these guys are the enemy pillars of the central banking empire, and now all of a sudden like they're trying to court us as friends and stuff. Like how do you split hairs on that kind of thing, or do you split hairs on that kind of thing? Like what's your take?
So I did give Trump some praise for where it's due for being Bitcoin pro Bitcoin, but I'm also going to go turn around and say that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party duopoly as well has been and is continuing to push central bank digital currencies. So it's not exactly clear if there's going to be any kind of use case for Bitcoin or stable coins, or exactly is it going to be a government-backed stable coin? Right. Of course, you lose anonymity there, and what's that going to look like? Are we driving people towards crypto with the idea that we're going to be adopting these stable coins in the future? Is it going to be a dollar alternative? I don't know what manifestation it's going to take. I know China has sort of their own kind of version of digital currencies that they use, and they have their whole social credit system and everything over there. So I'm very weary from a civil libertarian, anti-government perspective. I'm very weary of anytime the government or institutions like BlackRock, which are quasi-government institutions in a way, when they start to get into these assets, is it just to make money? Is it, I definitely agree with you. I mean, 10 years ago, I remember asking, I'm a Wendy's franchisee, and I was asking, talking to corporate about what if we were to use Bitcoin as a currency at the checkout. Like, how cool would that be to like buy a burger, a Baconator in Bitcoin? And the response I got back then was, well, it kind of has this reputation for being this sort of black market currency. And I'm like, well, I think the reputation's changing. I think it has changed, but I think with that change comes good and bad. I think you are seeing this sort of TradFi, big investors getting the Bitcoin, all these people that were totally against it. Is it just to make money? Is it, I don't know what to make of it. But I think as we see more and more legitimate use cases for crypto, especially Monero and Dash, which I think is now Darkcoin Dash and different privacy.
Dash now, it went through a few iterations. Dash was cool. Yeah.
Back in the day when they rebranded to be more friendly, investor friendly. So in places like Venezuela, they're using Monero daily, on a daily basis, because not only is it more stable, but the government can't track where you're spending it. So I just don't see that yet. Day to day, I see a lot more people parking dollars, into buying crypto and kind of storing it and waiting to see what happens. Now we are seeing it being used more. Of course, gold isn't used in day to day interactions, but it's still a valuable asset. So I think I think crypto is still in its adolescence, and I think we're just not there yet. But I do have full faith that I really do believe it's going to be just as disruptive, and already has been in many ways, to the dollar world order and the financial system. Because number one, Bitcoin is only capped at 21 million. The dollar has no cap; it's a scam coin, and there's also many altcoins. And actually, it was funny. I remember telling you before we got on the show that back in 2015 or so, I was debating a Bitcoin core dev, because a hot topic issue at the time was Bitcoin maximalism. Like, we can only put all of our time and energy into Bitcoin alone, or do we waste our time with altcoins? And I was a big altcoin guy myself. There's hundreds of altcoins today. Not all of them are worth investing in or purchasing or mining, but I think many are: Ethereum, Monero, many others. So I do think that no matter what happens with Bitcoin, I hope that there will always be that dissident asset, whether it's a Bitcoin derivative or another, whatever the case is, to fill that void. But I'm still hopeful. We'll see what happens. 10 years, a lot changed. So 10 more years, we'll see.
For sure. So one of the other things the Libertarian Party in the Bitcoin space has made an issue is sort of this free Roger stuff. Roger Ver was, I think, the very first venture capitalist, self-funded, and he just started angel investing in Bitcoin startups, I don't even know, 13 years ago. But he was independently wealthy, got into Bitcoin. Bitcoin made him wealthier, and he was the immediate give back guy. But then he got very controversial during the block size war. And the reason is, Roger always saw it as, hey man, Bitcoin needs to be useful in the economy for it to have a fundamental value. Otherwise, the fundamental value is just, the people arguing about price, which is itself problematic for various reasons. And he could wax on about it for forever, and I respect him for it. But he ended up, causing a bit of a rift and caused multiple rifts in the Bitcoin space. Roger and I've known Roger casually for a lot of years, and we agree on some things and disagree on others. But one of the things that I do agree with him on is that Bitcoin does need to do something other than just exist in order to have a fundamental value. And so he wrote the book Hijacking Bitcoin, which was excellent, quick read. It's not super long, so anybody watching, you could probably bang through it in a weekend if you don't have anything else to do. And it kind of walks through the history of subterfuge, the core devs accepting money from big finance and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, Bitcoin turns into, or goes from this rebel asset for payments and turns into this, no, it's a store of value, and we should all just do nothing with it and just get rich. Like, get rich by doing nothing. So it immediately starts sounding like a weird pitch. And, as soon as that book came out, like it blew up. It was very popular among Bitcoiners. And then he gets arrested in Spain for this whole giant tax debacle, something about not paying his exit tax on 2 of his old corporations and blah, 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 blah. Convoluted IRS sort of stuff. He's no longer a U.S. citizen, and they're trying to nail him for something that happened like 10 or 11 years ago. I'm curious, especially because Roger was one of the key people in the Free Ross campaign. That I would feel like the reciprocal for, hey, maybe we should talk about freeing Roger. We're not seeing a lot of uptake on the notion that we should free Roger, and whether or not we should, I think, is a totally separate conversation from, is the reason why it's not popular the fact that he's a contentious big blocker, that he's kind of really resisted the Bitcoin become TradFi asset, like that kind of thing. I'm curious, how deep in the weeds have you gotten into kind of the Bitcoin Civil War stuff, the big blockers versus small blockers, and then like what's your take on Roger's whole situation? And I'm curious, does the party have an official position? I know it's on some of the Libertarian Party website stuff, but what is the party's official position, if you can clarify?
Well, the party's official position is we want to see these political dissidents freed, because we view Roger as a political dissident that was more than likely targeted by the IRS because he got a little too close to the sun, and the IRS and the government doesn't want to have that, especially with something as threatening as making cryptocurrency a replacement for the dollar. I mean, let's just think about what the State Department and the U.S. has done to ensure dollar hegemony around the world. I mean, we've toppled whole regimes over the idea of threatening the petrodollar or U.S. dollar hegemony. I mean, ever since Bretton Woods post World War II, the U.S. has enjoyed the printing press power being the world's reserve currency, and of course we've abused it for the majority of that time, and that's why we're seeing our $37 trillion debt. The increase in spending, which fuels these wars in Ukraine and propping up Israel and other countries, and all the different waste, fraud, and abuse that Doge uncovered, but we continue to fund. And what we don't know about, I mean, the DoD's got multi-trillion dollars unaccounted for. So where's all this money coming from? Well, a lot of it's coming from taxes, a lot of it's coming from investors, but a lot of it's coming from inflation. It's not, they buy a lot of the government bonds that fund the government. We pay it back on, 13% of our federal budget interest. So, that machine, that manifestation, just like I read in Creature from Jekyll Island, he called it the Mandrake mechanism, just to make money appear, I think is truly threatened by somebody who is intent on seeing that dollar replaced, because a dollar is literally it's a debt slip. For every dollar that's printed, we owe interest on it. And so we don't have a gold-backed currency. We don't have a crypto-backed currency or replacement. Dollar is legal tender. From an agorist libertarian viewpoint, we believe that we should have a free marketing currency. So I do think at the end of the day, someone like Roger Ver, there should be absolutely a concerted effort, and I'm starting to see it grow. And I think the Libertarian Party could be at the forefront of this. And I think I know people on my team that want to see this through and see how we can be helpful and useful on this. But I think it's going to take the liberty movement as a whole, just like it happened for Ross. Because I met Mark Ross's mom, Lynn, in Freedom Fest in 2016. And so she has been at so many freedom events. She has been so outspoken with documentaries and interviews talking about her son. I mean, he's become an icon. I think rightfully Roger's the next icon. I know Ross is backing him. The Libertarian Party absolutely backs him. And, to be honest, who hasn't committed tax fraud except me, right? It's just a matter of, who are they selectively targeting to find out, hey, you had an unpaid traffic ticket from 15 years ago that, we're going to finally come and get you on. And of course, the IRS has been found guilty to actually targeting political dissidents on the right under the Obama administration. So it would be on brand for them to have gone after Roger for political reasons. And I think we as libertarians and, liberty-loving people, conservatives, whoever you are, if you love liberty, then I think making and you love cryptocurrency, freeing Roger Ver and being a real threat to the establishment monetary order is it's a brave thing to do.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Your IRS. I laughed because it's true. it's one of those things where, the tax code is so complicated that it's not difficult to pull out an edge case or whatever, and maybe you complied with this, but over here, sorry, like you owe us more money, and that kind of thing. And I think people who have very simple taxes don't understand that if you reach at all, if you try to be self-employed, if you try to invest in anything, that all of a sudden your taxes become just bonkers, and at that point, like, that's how you start getting people who start saying, like, man, who put this together? Who can I vote for that can make this less insane looking? But it's a really it's both fascinating but also pretty disheartening. So I think most people, tax day should be the biggest libertarian uptake and signups to the party membership. I would expect.
I think we're going to just send out, or I think that's the best day of your prospecting. Make sure everybody who's a prospective libertarian, they get their Libertarian Party, join us now letter on tax day.
Yes.
We believe we should abolish the entire IRS, the Fed, including the income tax, which has only been around for 110 years. So somehow we had a society before it. We could definitely do it after that.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the other things that actually got me into blockchain in the first place, is that, hey, if we have a very simple rules-based taxation system, tax and spend and who gets what and budgets and all these things could all be smart contracts. And if we had a scalable blockchain, this stuff could become quite simple. And of course, it's the accountants and stuff that don't want that to happen, because their industry loves the convoluted tax laws, because it keeps them and their clientele, keeps them wealthy. But
Gary Johnson back in 2016, he ran on the concept of fair tax. Some libertarians believe no tax is fair. I definitely think it would have been at least an incremental improvement, and it would have reduced something like 14. I forget the exact number, but we would have saved like trillions of dollars over time in just the fee that it takes to comply with the government, the IRS, and all these regulations. So just making it less convoluted saves money.
No, big fan. In fact, I used to be a fair tax activist. I ran our local fair tax chapter, and God, it must have been 2006 and 7 or something like that. But back in the day, I was a big Neil Bortz fan who wrote the book and got everybody ginned up about it. But it's a fascinating thing, especially because it's the convoluted mess of things. It's the complication. It's the minutia that keeps the powerful in power, because your average person, they don't have the time or the motivation to break into like the Creature in Jekyll Island or understand Fed policy or, any of this kind of stuff. Is like, hey man, I got bills to pay. I want to watch The Bachelor or whatever when I get home. That kind of thing.
Stressed out trying to make trying to just make ends meet, and libertarians trying to talk to you about quantitative easing and why it's the end of the world, and it can be a daunting. And I think it is that way on purpose. Quantitative easing, quantitative tightening. It's not quantum physics, but they make it sound that way on purpose. I think.
No, for sure. And what is the party's take on that kind of thing? Like, how do you get past the nonsense? Because I say the same thing as a big blocker, and I have a very nuanced view on Bitcoin, and I think BSV. This is the most contentious statement in the blockchain space, that BSV is the real Bitcoin. And this is the kind of thing that's gotten me canceled from all kinds of, you're a scammer, you're this and that. I'm like, well, no, you got to take one step deeper into like defining what Bitcoin is. And it's an unbroken chain of digital signatures, blah, 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 blah. Like within 30 seconds, we're so deep in the minutia that only very technical people know what the hell I'm talking about. And then they're just like, man, is this the one that's going to make me rich by doing nothing? And that's the conversation. That's where they keep the conversation on that too, which is why I think the quote unquote hijacking of Bitcoin has been successful in that regard too. But I'm curious, and I do this for my own work and my own benefit, is like, okay, how can I simplify my argument about Bitcoin and Bitcoin's value into something that a normal person can understand? And I'm going to ask you, what can libertarians do to simplify the message to get people to understand, like, hey, this isn't that complicated. We actually just believe in, leaving you alone, but also like the market can help. Like, we're not bad people. We don't want you to die in the streets, like Democrats might say, and we don't want you to, whatever. But do you have in your mind, like if you had a magic wand and an extra $1 billion, how would the Libertarian Party be explaining itself to like your average Main Street American?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just want to say, I remember when I was trying to explain blockchain to people, and I'd get these like 10-minute convoluted, trying to explain, the block, the amount of zeros at the end of the hash that makes a block, and the difficulty adjustments, and blah, 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 blah. And I think one of my favorite analogies I heard was, imagine if idling your car produced solve Sudoku puzzles you can use to buy crack. And I thought that was very funny, memorable. But yeah, I mean, with selling liberty, with selling libertarianism, I've always tried to meet people where they're at and try to figure out, okay, what issues does this person really care about? Is it inflation? Is it just, freedom as an issue? Is it a social issue? And trying to say, okay, look, I want to end the war on drugs because, I have a sister or a family member that died from an overdose. Okay, well, it's because the war on drugs that we treat people with medical issues or addictions as criminals, when the free market would be there to actually treat them as individuals, between their doctor and them or whatever, and try to change society to view these issues differently. But I think ultimately, my pitch has always been, bring it back down to, at the end of the day, if I want something from you, Kurt, I'm not going to hit you over the head to take it. I'm not going to demand I point a gun at you and say, right, Kurt, I need, give me $20 because Fred over next door, needs some help. No, we as civilized people, we want to help our neighbors. We want to see better society. Humans are either inherently good, which means we don't need all this government overreach, or inherently bad, to which we still don't need this government overreach. But we want to distill it down to ideas of human respect, dignity, try to personify things that in a way that people can understand. So the non-aggression principle, keeping things towards the golden rule, how the free markets make things better. I think these are all compelling arguments that libertarians can employ to try to make people understand, not just policy-wise, because policy differs, but the principles behind the ideology and how things may actually work in the real world. Like if somebody wants universal health care and for people to actually be healthy, I want the same thing. I want universal health care. I want people to be healthy and to have affordable health care. I just think the free market should be able to provide it. And I can provide data points as to why. But we want the same things, because when I talk to somebody across the aisle who's maybe a socialist or a Democrat or Republican, a lot of the times, I mean, not in all cases, but most of the time, we want the same things. We want prosperity. We want our families to be safe. We want to be able to move up the economic ladder. We want a country to thrive. And, we believe that the best way to get there is through human liberty and prosperity. And I kind of gave you a long answer, but, I think that, at the end of the day, it's also a matter of presentation. So if I'm an asshole to somebody trying to explain my point of view, they may not agree with me no matter how correct I am, even though I'm correct. But planting those seeds, showing people, I think, how the current status quo isn't working for them, and providing a solution is always the right answer. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And it's I think it comes down to meeting people where they are. I think Donald Trump, actually, to his credit, he did a good job campaigning on that principle. Hey, you can't afford milk. How come? Well, we're going to do this and that. Now, did he end up doing all that? No, of course. Republican Party did the exact opposite. Made a bunch of debt and everything else. But talking about the Federal Reserve, the money printing, inflation, it doesn't really engage people. But what if I said to you, we want to make things more affordable by bringing back sound money. We want to, do what Javier Milei is doing, and bring liberty back to make people richer again, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of ways to say it. I think it depends on your target audience. But yeah, I think ultimately the message is the same, and it's leaving people alone and keeping the government out of it.
For sure. Well, it's funny. Like Trump is such an incredible campaigner, and his rhetoric and his ability to connect directly to the people that he wants to connect to is probably unmatched in our lifetimes. I don't know who is as good at that. Like maybe Ronald Reagan was, but I was a little too young to experience that in real time. So, but it just seems like, it doesn't matter what anybody says about him. The people who like him, and even the people that are just a little bit in the middle, like when they hear him actually talk, they just kind of feel like, oh, like he understands me, and he like endears people to his the simplicity of what he's talking about, despite the fact that I think in many regards is just completely like, I think he believes what he says when he says it, and then he forgot he said it because he's onto the next thing. But I'm curious, from a communication standpoint, and cutting through the noise, like does the Libertarian Party need like a special candidate? Like are you looking for the right personality? I think in some way, and I would hate to make it about like you just need the right cult of personality to make this all work, but I think what would it take to get somebody like a Ron Paul, who I think on paper was really great at the same thing. I think he was a little too old by the time he was actually in the process of running for president. I think people looked at him and said, I kind of like what he says, but he sounds a little too weird when he says it. And I feel like he's too old. He's just got a little bit too much of a grandpa vibe, which is unfair because I think he was in very good shape. I mean, he's still alive and kicking now, but I think the optics of him were a basic part of the problem with him. How does the Libertarian Party cultivate candidates young enough, like creating a governor of a major state who's in like their 30s or 40s, such that they could be president in their 50s or 60s, and have that sort of thing? Like that's a pretty long process. Like we're talking about a 20 to 40 year plan, but how do you go and do that? I mean, like the major parties have a system for these kind of things. Is it possible to build that kind of system? Is that something the party is actively working on?
So one of the things I love about Ron Paul, he was such a great communicator, because depending on his audience, he would slightly change how he would speak to his audience, but the message was the same. If we made crystal meth legal tomorrow, I wouldn't go out and smoke crystal meth. He made these very salient points, and he was able to say it, I think, really well depending on his audience. And I mean, Ron Paul really had a following. I think he was, number one, very sincere and very principled, which I think people really enjoyed. I think that's why Thomas Massey has always been one of the most principled men on Capitol Hill.
For sure.
I think you're seeing a big resurgence in that because people, they want that principledness. But to your point, I mean, I was talking to some folks the other day about this. It's like, how do you find somebody like a Javier Milei, somebody who's very eccentric and eclectic and has this crazy, lion-like charisma, and they got the chainsaw, we're cutting through government, the imagery and everything. Right. Or even Donald Trump, who for years was on TV. He was a TV star. Yep. And so he had that enigmatic, larger-than-life personality. And sometimes you might find the perfect candidate, and everything they're saying is 100% correct and, right, and the best policies and the degrees and everything. And that'll get somebody pretty far. But having that communication style to really hook people in, it is something that I think it's a gift not everybody has. I know in the Libertarian Party, Larry Sharp, Spike Cohen, Dave Smith, who was
always really liked Spike, actually. Yeah.
Spike is excellent. Really nice guy, great communication. So I think everybody's got a little bit of a different style, but finding the right candidates, when you find that person, because I don't think there's any formula, but when you find them, you want to keep them engaged. You want to keep them involved. You want them to be, sort of showcased. And you don't want their talents to go to waste. So it's hard to say, it's hard to say who's going to be our nominee in the next few years. But I think the delegates are always looking for that person who can be a good messenger, because we know we're not going to get 51% of the vote unless something happens. Maybe Elon Musk comes in and, backs us, and, anything can happen. But ultimately, our goal as an ideology is to say, okay, we're a third party. Most of our races that we control are local municipal elections. Every now we get the odd state house every couple of years or whatever. Maybe somebody flips voter registration. So our goal at the national level is to grow membership, get the message out there, and perhaps extract some concessions from the other ruling parties that are going to be trying to vie for our support. So they might run on a libertarian, type principle. Oh, crypto. The crypto community is a big community. A libertarian party is a pretty big voting block. They get a couple % of the vote. That's the difference between one candidate getting elected to another.
Yep.
And we tend to pull equally from both sides. So I think if you look at the rates of people going either NPA, third party, or just not voting, that's actually the biggest voting block. It's just people that are sick of the duopoly. But I digress. So those personalities. I mean, I think we're going to get more of those types of people as we continue to grow as a political philosophy, because I'm just seeing more young people self-identify as libertarians than I did 10 years ago. I don't know if you see the same, even as Bitcoiners, as as sort of these political dissident, subgenres of American culture types. I think we're seeing more dissatisfaction than ever with the institutions of government, the media, and the Republican and Democratic parties. I mean, Congress is, everybody is just fed up, and everybody knows it's just this big fat, scam. And so they're looking for other options. And as they dig and they find, they're discovering libertarianism. Unfortunately, they're also discovering socialism. And so I think we're seeing sort of this divide, politically. I think the next generation is probably going to be a little bit more extreme on the people that actually study politics, but you're always going to have the people who really just don't. They want what everybody else wants. They want a stable future, stable life, prosperity, and it's up to the parties and the candidates to try to capture those people the best they can and hopefully steward them towards a good future. Because ultimately, we don't want to be in charge of you. We just want to let you live your life how you wish to live it, without us coming with some central plan or for you to change your values. So
it's interesting. I have written a couple times about this. I write a weekly article, usually about Bitcoin, but also quite a bit about like the culture at large and business and politics. But one of the interesting things is that younger people, for the first time in 50 years, are trending toward like kids are going back to church and they drink less and they're having fewer like lascivious sexual partners and some of these other things. I think like all of a sudden something about kids that are like 15 to 25 are looking at their parents and their grandparents and being like, I think they might be losers, and they're just, and they're just trying to make themselves better in some way, and that's turned into like peak membership in like the Orthodox Church and things like that. And it's like among young people, so it's like 17-year-olds who are like, I'm not going out to party. Like I'm gonna go. Like I'm working on becoming a member here. I'm gonna get baptized and like that kind of thing.
When we were young, it was probably a loser to do the opposite. It's like, we're gonna go drinking, and we're like, 16, we're gonna go in the woods and pass out in a cornfield. It's like, and now we're not cool anymore. It's like, maybe where did that really lead you? It's like, well, maybe you got a point. I was talking to a Russian Orthodox priest. His name is Father Moses. You can check him out on YouTube. And I asked him, why do you think the Orthodoxy is growing? Because I'm actually Coptic Orthodox on my dad's side. I grew up Catholic on the other side. And he said that, a lot of young men are looking for stability and also an outlet to express their masculinity, which I thought was very interesting because the Orthodox Church provides a very rigid structure that a lot of young people are looking for. And I can imagine why. I mean, if you just look at the 24-hour news cycle that we have, the world is so crazy. There's no, and I don't know how much of it's perceived versus actual. I mean, perceived, it's obviously a lot more crazy, but at the same time, is it kind of, it is kind of nuts, how much has changed in the last 5 years with COVID and Ukraine and, all kinds of stuff going on in the world. But I think that this next generation and even people in our generation, members of our generation, the older generation, we're looking around saying, there needs to be some stability. And, socially, you're seeing sort of this tradcon versus, sort of this more libertinism, if that even really exists or whatever. People are kind of, trying to figure it out. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I really do believe that the instability, a lot of it comes from our elected and unelected so-called leaders. It happens
Yeah.
from DC, because all the decisions made at that level unfortunately affect our lives. But if I can give any advice to your audience, I would say that the biggest step you could do to try to create some stability and to bring back liberty in your community is to run for local office.
Yeah.
So if you've got a 5-man, 7-man city commission or county commission, you run for office, get known in the community, have your voice be heard, talk about what engages you, come up with a platform, get out there and just run for office. And if you and 3 buddies get on that city commission, hey, guess what? You can do more good for your community than, than voting for the next presidential nominee. Unfortunately,
sure.
I'm not saying you shouldn't, but the reality is, being closest to your community, that's where most of the change happens. I mean, you take over the sheriff's office, the sheriff can tell the feds to F off, right?
Right.
So it's pretty amazing, school board or whatever the case is. And I think that's the most profound thing people can do. And it probably has a lot more impact than a lot of the federal politics that we give credence to. Now, of course, we want to be able to change that in the future, get in there, because these policies are destructive. It's very, very clear that the duopoly, they're like professional wrestlers. They fight in public, but behind closed doors, they agree, and they're friends, and they vote on the same policies and bills. So it's all smokescreen. But at that local level, I think there's so much change that can be had, and I think that's a big white pill for a lot of people to take home, and be that change you wish to see in your own community first. I think that's the best place to start, with yourself first, then your community.
Right. No, it's I think really killer advice. Frankly, I'd love to see this made into a clip that we share after, because it's true. I mean, people are obsessed about the president, but they don't know their own mayor. They don't even know their name, and it's ridiculous. So.
And there's nothing stopping anybody from walking in and setting up an appointment with their city manager and with their mayor. Like, you have to talk to me.
Yeah, I know. It's mind-boggling. So one question I've gotten from a few people is, when I talk about libertarians or being a libertarian in general, I get the occasional person who's like, are you one of those, like, they start thinking like hardline separatist, your Randy Weaver kind of people, like, which actually I like Randy. So not to criticize, like, I don't want to criticize sovereign citizens or people that do police audits or these kind of things. But I think some people get this view that libertarians are all like problematic, ratchety, like working on actively making like public servants' lives harder and that kind of thing. And I think there's some of that. And again, I want to stress, like, I think sovereign citizens are right about a lot of key issues, and really put it, like, drawing a line in the sand about their rights and property and those kind of things. But I'm curious, like, what's your position on like that kind of thing, or like just general, like the people who become like celebritarians and cause chaos as like maybe just marketing their own YouTube channel, but like I think genuinely trying to do what's best for liberty or the liberty movement or whatever too. But like, what's your take on those kind of things? Are they helpful? Are they educating people? Or is it something that you wish was a little less like showy and difficult?
I've seen, videos of libertarians in Keene, New Hampshire, going around harassing like parking maid,
Sure.
attendants, whatever you want to call them, and stuff like that. And is that really making liberty more appealing? Probably not. Maybe to some people it is. I think there's a lot of angry people out there that are very angry with the government when they discover all the injustice and
Sure.
the aggression, everything like that. They latch onto that kind of content because it's very appealing. It's like, we get to get back at them. It's like the people that go and pay their parking ticket with pennies. I mean, I get just as pissed off about a parking ticket, so I get it. I haven't done anything yet, but but at the end of the day, I don't see many libertarians. I mean, the ones I meet in the real world are all very, very cool people. You'd have a beer with them.
Yeah.
They have kids too, or maybe you meet some eclectic people as well, but they're passionate about freedom and liberty, and you get a bunch of diverse people from all walks of life in a room, and you're like, oh wait, we've all read Mises and Rothbard, and we agree on these same things. And, maybe you have some people that are, prioritize more certain issues than others. Maybe people are more anti-war, other people are more, pro-free speech or whatever, but they all agree that the government should be not involved in any of these things. And so I think it's the most useful coalition because, everybody might have their primary issues, but we all agree on one single issue, which is freedom. And we don't ask each other to change our values. We'll just ask that we keep the government out of it. So if somebody wants to be a trad con and live in West Virginia and have a farm with their trad wife and have 8 kids and go to Catholic church, like, hey, knock yourself out.
Cool.
If somebody wants to live in the city and go clubbing with their friends and drop ecstasy on the weekends, you go knock yourself out. But as long as we all agree that the individual is the smallest minority, and at least politically we agree that we should respect each other, then I think there's a lot of grounds there for collaboration amongst a diverse group to get things done, to respect human freedom and dignity, and like I said, the libertarians I've met have all been mostly highly intelligent, well-read, and empathetic. So it goes against the stereotype a little bit. We don't want people dying in the streets.
Right.
We don't want to sell, all the water to Nestle. That's not where we're coming from.
Which is funny because Republicans and Democrats sold all the water to Nestle. So
exactly. People make all these arguments. Well, if the libertarians were in charge, then everybody would be addicted to drugs or this or that. It's like, isn't that what's happening now? So
for sure. So we got about 2 minutes left. I'd be very happy to give you the final word here and let you go.
Sure. Well, first, thanks so much for having me on. And I would encourage anybody here who's either libertarian curious, or even libertarian adjacent to head over to lp.org, sign up for the newsletter. You can become a donor, a member of the Libertarian Party. You don't have to change your voter registration if you don't want to. Of course, I encourage that you do. If you're very curious about the Libertarian Party or the philosophy, check out our platform. Check out if you have a local chapter or state party to take a look at. And yeah, as always, you can follow me on X, Steven Nekhaila, and I look forward to hopefully working with many liberty-minded people to help change the country and work towards local community change as well. So that's what we're set out to do, and I appreciate being on.
Steven, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. It's funny. I generally like arguing with people on these sorts of things, but I basically agree with you. So it's been a real pleasure. And we're not exactly local to each other, but if you ever come up north to Palm Beach County, I'd love to buy you a coffee or a beer or whatever you drink, and
that'd be awesome.
Have a good time. Yeah,
I'd love to. So, I'll take both.
Sounds good. Talk soon.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. So that was Steven Nekhaila, the chairman of the Libertarian National Committee. Politics, it's funny. I always see libertarianism, to me, is always kind of the anti-politics. Like, politics exist to get people to focus on their differences and come up with ways to dislike each other in order to gin up votes. And the liberty is more like, no. Like, we can all be friends if we actually just respect each other's, individual sovereignty and property and our human liberty. And well, wouldn't that be wonderful? So, everybody, it's been a pleasure. Please, again, like, subscribe, hit the alert bell. Please patronize our sponsors, Rock Wallet and Otherworldly TCG. Which reminds me, we need to go for the comment of the day. And we've had a lot of good ones. So if we want to bang out a comment of the day, let's have it, Mr. Producer. We got, I really like Joe Jorgensen. Love it. Okay, cool. Crypto Spartacus, who actually we should have you on the show. Please reach out to the real CoinGeek account on X, and we will get you cards courtesy of Otherworldly TCG, our delightful sponsor. I want to thank you for watching the show and for sharing around and for your comments. It's been a lively one. We had a good chat today in the chat box over here. A lot of people chit chatting and Face. I know you love being a blue state Democrat, but someday I think I'm going to get you to be a libertarian. We're going to work our way there. So thank you again. Truly, the show couldn't happen without you. I really appreciate your views and your friendship and all the rest of it, everybody. And the most libertarian thing to say, like this is me distilling all my libertarian values into one key catchphrase, and it's be good to each other. I think that's it. I think it's the easiest way to explain libertarianism. Be good to each other. I did it. I distilled it all the way down. I will see you next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, everybody. This is the CoinGeek Weekly Livestream. I am Kurt Wuckert Jr. And thank you to Alex Vidal for setting up this interview. I really appreciate him and everybody else. Goodbye.